Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, muni muni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their principal, their librarian, and also please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Darshana Khiani. She is here to celebrate building a dream. Before we invite Darshana back into the studio, we want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please click on the Your School Needs a Podcast button up at the top of the page. We have a really exciting program where we are looking to work with schools to help them launch their own school podcast that promotes literacy and reading and families growing closer together. We are so very excited about this program. You know, the Reading with Your Kids podcast, we've been publishing since 2017. And during that time, we've accumulated over 800 hours of interviews with some of the best authors in children's literature, covering every topic and featuring authors from all around the world. We are transforming those interviews into bite-sized, kid-friendly nuggets that you and your kids will love to listen to together. And we want to encourage schools to create their own podcast using original content created by your students along with our archival content. It's a win-win-win for everybody. It's going to encourage family reading. It's going to help your kids develop better reading skills, better comprehension skills, help them raise their test scores, and it's going to improve the communication between parents and schools. Check it out today. We're really excited about it. Readingwithyourkids.com and click on the Your School Needs a Podcast button up at the top of the page. Returning to the podcast from the beautiful state of California, our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called Building a Dream, and it is a dream of a book. Please welcome back to the show, Darshana Khiani. Darshana, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you, Jeff, for having me back. It is so wonderful, and I can't wait to talk about my latest book.
Yeah, you know, we typically don't have a guest back on as soon. You were just on the show in the summertime. But this is such a wonderful story that I really did want to get it out there. The story takes place in southern Thailand. Pick it up from there, please.
Right. So there's a place in Phang Bay, which is in southern Thailand, and there's an island of Koh Panyee. And back in the 80s, so the late 1980s, there were a group of boys there. They loved playing soccer, to them known as football. And they played wherever they could. And they lived on a fishing village, which was built on stilts on the water. And so there really wasn't hardly any usable land. Maybe a little bit here, a little bit there, depending on the tides. But they wanted to get better. They would watch the World Cup and, the television and the cafe in their village. And they were like, we need to play. We want to compete with the mainland boys, but we need a place to play as a team. And so they went on a mission to figure out how to make that happen. And eventually they built their own floating soccer pitch out of scrap material that was available on the island. So scrap wood, plastic barrels that were used for the fishing rafts. And they made their own floating pitch, and they ended up forming an official team, and they actually became one of the best youth leagues in southern Thailand. And more importantly, they started a tradition that is still happening today. Like the two pillars of the community before soccer came along was fishing and their religion. They are Muslim. It's a Muslim community. But now they've added a third pillar, which is soccer.
You know, that is so cool. I'm remembering back to when I played football, soccer, back in high school here in Boston. And my high school, we didn't have a home field, inner city school. And so we had to travel to another neighborhood. And at that time, we thought, oh, we have to run, a mile and a half, 2 miles every day to get to our practice field and our game field. And boy, that was such a hardship. But, compared to kids who are living in the water, who need to build a raft that they can play on, we didn't have it so hard.
Well, the fact that you had to run a mile and a half meant that you were that much stronger, too.
We agree. And that was the only thing we had going for us. Teams would come in and play us, and they would be terrified, not because we were skilled at all, but because they knew we would just run them and hit them until they got tired. But I digress. I think one of the things, we love to talk about the conversations that families can have when reading an author's book. And I think one of the first things that a family can start talking about is this idea that people live in houses in the water. They literally live on the water. They're there. Their house is on stilts. They get from one home to another via a network of planks and makeshift bridges and whatnot. I don't think a lot of people here in the States can really imagine that and get their heads wrapped around that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I thought was so cool. I mean, I learned about this story through a YouTube video. So, I was just amazed. And I love what Dow's done. And she's done a really good job of capturing that feeling of what it's like to be in this village and what it looks like and how to get from one place to another. You have to find the right walkways to get around, kind of like Venice a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really cool because I think so often we take for granted of what people's lifestyles are like based on what our lifestyle is like.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of children, not ton, but there's various children's books. I think there's a handful about how kids get to school, and it's the same thing. It's like, oh, some have to take, a boat to school, or I think somewhere in the Alps, they have to take a tram to school, or, just all these cool things that you never think about. It's not the school bus. It's not the car. It's not riding your bike. Mm-hmm. It's something different.
Yeah, yeah. And Dow that you refer to, of course, is the illustrator, and the illustrations in the book are really wonderful. They really, I think, spark the imagination.
Yeah, their dreamlike quality, which is one of the things that was important for me, or that I expressed to my editor, is we sort of capture. I want somebody who can do the people, but this is also a book about the setting and the environment, and can capture the beauty of that place.
Yeah. And
she's done it, with the color palette and the terrain, and showing the mountain of the island and stuff with the water.
Yeah, yeah. What about, I had an experience when my kids were much younger. We were sponsoring a young man who was studying to be a priest in India at the time. My kids were maybe 7 and 5, I think. And we were very invested in writing letters back and forth to this young man and learning about his life. And there was one day when we were in Costco, and it was a weekend, and we just literally walked through Costco, and we ate so many samples. We were, we were filled, and we didn't have to go to lunch that day, and we were all joking about it, and we're in the van going home, and I said, We probably ate more food for free walking through Costco today than a lot of people in Joby's Village get to eat in a week. And it was a really powerful kind of, I was going to say slap to the back of the head, but it was a real wake-up call for me and for my entire family to help us understand just how blessed we are. And I think that the kids who are, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old who love soccer and are playing on these state-of-the-art facilities that so many kids here in the States and Canada and other countries are playing on these days, this is a book that could really help open their eyes to the fact that we don't all have the same gifts and advantages. Some of us are greatly, greatly blessed.
Yeah. I do think that comes across. I do feel that sometimes it's really hard to appreciate what you have until you see the other side and can go deeper into it. Obviously, the best is personal connection and hearing personal stories. So I would say this book can start those conversations, right? I would also encourage anyone who's read the book to go search for the videos, because that will make it even seem so much more real and to understanding the challenges. And, these boys, they really wanted it and they really had to fight hard for it. There wasn't just the environmental challenges, right, of finding a place. It was also societal challenges of the community. They were like, why are you doing this? Our sport is boat racing. They have long-tailed boats, which the fishermen use, and, taxi service or fishing, but they also get used for racing. And they're like, that's what we do. Why are you trying to do this? And so kids can appreciate that. But I think what I also want them really to get from the book is that anything's possible. So what if you don't have here, they didn't have a place to play. You know what? It didn't matter. They figured it out. And it's that you're always going to be faced with challenges for whatever it is you want. And it's up to you to persevere.
Yeah. The other thing that I think that this book and reading this book together as a family can kind of celebrate is the fact that, here we do have these differences. Most of us who are listening live in the States. We have access to all these beautiful fields. Even kids who aren't wealthy have access to fields and different facilities and coaching and whatnot. These kids in Thailand had to build their own field. But the fact is, despite all those differences, we all love the same game. Yeah.
There's something about it. That's your common thread, right?
Yeah.
It's exercise. It's fun. It's competitive. I wished I could have played soccer. I didn't have it where I grew up as a kid.
Well, it's a great game. It's, amazing that it's not as popular here. Although I have to tell you, I played in the 70s and, I was really weird back in the 70s that I played soccer, and these days it's much more popular. There are many more kids that are involved in the sport. It is a great sport. It's a lot of fun. How did you find out about these kids and their amazing accomplishment?
So, as I mentioned earlier, there was a YouTube video. So back in 2013, there was a humanitarian commercial that was made by Thai National Bank, or Thai Military Bank, I forget, some bank. And they made a commercial, long format video about where they recreated this story that happened in the 1980s. And so I saw that video and I just loved it. I was just like, wow, I was amazed. I was like, this is really cool. I'm like, kids need to know about this. If these kids can do this, you can do anything type of a idea. And so then I just started researching, which was a really big challenge because this is not, something you learn in textbooks or anything, right? It's pop culture sort of It's a true story, but so it was a real challenge, but I did find a bunch of interviews that were done by various sports outlets online with the head of that village, which was one of the main guys on the team back in the 80s, and then found a few newspaper articles that I could reference.
Yeah.
But there was stuff missing, which is why or some holes in the research, which is why I was like, I don't feel comfortable saying this is nonfiction. So that's why I'm like, most of it's true, but not necessarily all of it. So it's inspired.
Inspired by. That brings up an interesting point. A lot of people who listen are aspiring authors. A lot of kids, a lot of people who are listening are kids, and they want to write. You bring up a good point. You don't always have to have access to the actual persons that were involved in the story in order to tell the story. Can you talk a little bit more about doing that? Of course, if somebody's not alive anymore, we don't have access to that person. If somebody's on the other side of the world and they don't have access to Zoom or phones, or you don't know their number, it's hard. So can you talk just a little bit about that in putting this story together without being able to interview the participants?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, my first intention when I started the project was to do nonfiction, but it became really hard. I kept trying to reach out, trying to get to somebody in the village, and it just wasn't happening. I did look for other primary sources. So luckily those video interviews would be considered primary sources. Obviously the newspaper articles had some quotes, but most of it was secondhand. Normally the rule is, any fact you get, you want to be able to source it in 3 places. That wasn't going to happen in this case. And so then I looked at, why am I writing this story? It wasn't just to retell, it was to inspire. And then also to deepen that connection, I did include dialogue, which is made up. And I named the boys, even though I think I only knew 1 or 2 names of the actual players. So I was able to take some more leeway in order to create more of a narrative story and connect and build connection between the reader and the book. But so that's how other authors, how you can do it. And I do think it's important, at least for me, I like to be able to defend anything that's written. So it's important to me to have a source if I'm going to say something. Make sure it's right.
Right. You bring up a good point. We've talked here on the podcast about how important it is for parents to help their kids become media literate, to understand that we have to take the time to discern whether or not something that we're reading is reliable. And you mentioned that this story that you wrote, this story inspired by true events. And I think just sitting down and having a conversation with our kids about that phrase, when we see that phrase, inspired by, helping them understand that, yeah, this is based on something that really happened. It's based on real people, but this wasn't that person's name, and this isn't factual, and some of it is interpretation, and it was passed down. And I think those are really important distinctions for our kids to understand, and for us to start talking to our kids about at an early age.
Yeah, I think I think it's becoming more and more important because of the way information is consumed. And sometimes it's speed over quality, maybe sometimes. I know personally with my kids, whenever we watch like a fiction or, cause this happens a lot in movies, right? Where you'll be inspired by a true story, or even when we were watching Hamilton, the musical, it's like later we'll go dig, okay, what was it actually correct or what was fudged for the sake of the show or the sake of the way the narrative was. And just to understand, because things are always much more dramatic in a book or in a movie than they probably were in real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, we do need, and luckily the schools, they're doing a lot. I've seen it, of educating kids from an earlier age of how to process the information, how to verify the information, which I think is just going to continue.
Yeah, I think it's vital. I think it's vital. You're mentioning different movies. I'm really surprised when you mentioned that Hamilton didn't actually rap. Way back then. I'm shocked. But I remember watching a movie about the Boston Marathon bombing, and there was one scene where Marky Mark gets in his car, and 2 minutes later he's on the other side of the city. I'm like, wait a minute, no, it takes even with lights and sirens, it takes a lot longer. You're talking about 3-4 different cities and whatnot. So, so I think that's important for kids to, again, it's important for kids to understand.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you have, you've created this wonderful story that's inspiring kids. Is that something that is important to you in your reading? In your writing? Are you always looking to find a story that's going to inspire kids to go and reach their dreams and be the best that they can be?
That's a really good question. I've never really thought. I have 3 books out now, I guess. For this one, it was inspiring. I don't know. I think if I were to look for a common thread across my books, I think it would actually be the word persistence. Mm. So, in this one, they have to persist against the challenges to achieve what they want, right? And How to Wear a Sari, which is my debut, she persists at trying to manage the 17 feet of fabric in order to drape herself. In that one, there's also the theme of, hey, it's always challenging. And when you do things for the first time, it may not always work out, but that's okay. That's how you learn. Mm-hmm. And then in I'm an American, it's just showing how we as people are persisting in this country, how the immigrants are faring, how whether new or old, and just how it is a challenge, but we keep marching forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. You know what else is important? To tell people where they can go to find out more about building a dream and find out more about all the things that are coming from your mind.
Thank you. So if people want to learn more about me, they can at my website, which is darshanakhiani.com. And if they would like to get a copy of the book, they can go to their local libraries and see if it's there or request it. And it is sold at all the usual booksellers. But definitely go check out your favorite indie.
Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Building a Dream. Our guest has been Darshana Khiani. Darshana, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Jay De La Vega. She'll be returning to the podcast to celebrate Wepa, her brand new children's book. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Darshana Khiani. Please be sure to check out Building a Dream. Also want to thank everybody in advance, everybody who goes to readingwithyourkids.com and clicks on the Your School Needs a Podcast button up at the top of the page. I also want to thank all the people who, after clicking on that button, tell their kids' principals, their teachers, their librarians, their counselors about the program. We're really excited about it. We loved coming to your community. We also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.